Hey guys, in this video we're going to talk about the delay spot. So, if you're anything like me before I met Doug, you might not even know what the word delay means. Just to clarify, it's when it goes check check on the flop and you were the pre-flop raiser, and they check again to you on the turn. So, if you're like anything like most tournament players, this is a spot where you probably were just only value betting really. You check back your second pair sometimes and maybe some ace high. And if you hit on the turn, maybe you bet. But you really didn't have too many bluffs because you put them all in the C bet. I think adding in the delay bluffs to your overall range is a great thing, and one of the things that starts helping you become from an average player to a much better player, mainly because you start making yourself just much tougher to play against. I think we've all sort of been there on the turn when we would say the big blind and they check back the flop and we're just like, well, they never have air because they put all the air on the C bet. So that makes you able to play the turn much much better if you're the big blind, if you know the other person just doesn't have any air. And you don't want to be that type of player. You want to have bluffs in every range. And remember, that's how we separate ourselves, and that's like the crux of the Doug strategy. Let's just talk about the turn, so the delay in general. Most tournament players probe way too wide and mergy, which is makes it a pretty interesting spot on the turn when they check to you. Because I think a lot of people just sort of bet their pairs because they want some value or protection or equity denial. They have a lot of reasons, but what ends up happening is when they check, they have a pretty weak range, which means this is a great bluffing spot. This is a spot where I like to like, especially a couple years ago when I first started playing more like how Doug liked me to play. I just got away with just murder on these turn bluffs because basically no tournament players bluff there. So if I checked back the flop, they would just be like done with the hand unless they had a decent hand. So and if they had like even a middling hand, they would just sort of bet it on the turn because like I don't know, whatever, let's just bet it and see what happens. So this was a sweet spot to bluff. I think it's still pretty great. It's not as good as it was a couple years ago, but it's still like one of the best spots to bluff, I think, in tournaments. I was looking at my HUD and it was only hands from a year and a half ago because my database got messed up, and I had an 80% win rate in the spot where it goes check check and I bet the turn. So it just shows you how much like, and yeah, just looking through the hands, like there was so many turn folds, it was insane. And like sometimes you get called on the turn, but like even then it's like your river success rate is going to be pretty high too. So this is just a spot that you really want to bluff, and it's a pretty credible spot, especially if you play like we do where we have a lot of top pairs that check back the flop. We have some good second pairs as well. It's not like we're going to be necessarily over bluffing this spot, but I think it's definitely a spot you could consider it. But we're definitely going to have a lot of value bets here, like top pair that are weak top pairs that check back the flop, turn hands that turn top pair that didn't bet the flop, some good second and mid pairs. I think just the way we construct our flop range, we're just naturally gonna have a lot of value bets, so we don't need to worry about that too much. I think these are the kind of the standard stuff that even I think the average tournament player has already figured out, which is if they're gonna check back a value bet, it's gonna be sort of their weak top pairs or maybe a second pair. And then, I think the way a lot of tournament players sort of structure it is they might like check those hands and then they'll bet everything that's good, then bet all their air, and then bet all their like third and fourth pairs just because I don't know, they just feel like it. But we're obviously gonna have a much more structured range than that. So, but we're gonna have some similar-ish value bets on the turn in general. Our bluffs will be the high card hands that have not necessarily great showdown. So like in most situations, it won't be ace high. It would be king high, queen high type hands, depending on the board texture. So if it's a king high board, maybe we're bluffing with queen high and jack highs that we check back the flop with. Or if it's there's a lot of different situations. But basically, it's the high card hands that are generally going to be betting once and giving up. A lot of times, especially if they can improve to a pair that's decent, it's nice to bet them once, and then if we get there, sweet, we can value bet. But we just have some equity in the pot, and we just want to have some bet once give ups. Generally our bets are going to be the turn draws, so like any turn flush draws or straight draws that we didn't bet the flop with. Potentially you're going to want to delay barrel with your high cards depending on the run out, but in general, you're picking hands that you want to be able to bet twice. Like we don't want to have too many bet once give ups. So like zero equity hands, like your three high, four high, five high, or just like, 10-8 of clubs on a board that it's like, two spades, two diamonds, and it has nothing to going for it. I think those hands you generally want to stick into the double delay, which is another. We'll talk more about that in a separate video. But generally, zero equity hands kind of suck to bet on the turn because you can if they call, you basically never win the pot unless you bet again and they fold. Like you would have to have no equity to improve. So it's better to just I think better to you don't want to just make the pot bigger when you have basically zero equity in it. I think you can just like save for the river, see what happens, and still get a good bluffing opportunity on the river. I think the only exception to maybe betting some zero equity hands on the turn would be if villain sort of bets extremely mergy on the turn. Like he's betting like all his pairs and maybe even some random good ace highs or whatever, and basically doesn't have a check calling range. Then of course just go for it on the turn. Just bet your zero equity. Don't worry about it. But I think versus anyone reasonable and especially versus anyone good, betting zero equity on the turn is kind of mediocre because it's just really hard to you're just putting dead money out there that you're just not going to get back most of the time. Let's just look at a couple of the value bet spots first. I think these are pretty simple. Again, I think a lot of you guys are probably all DDRing this kind of stuff. So we opened big blind defense. We check back king 9-9 with king 3, pretty standard. Turns at 2. So our value bets are like king X we checked back, maybe queens. Maybe we checked back some worse bad nines. So I think all pretty standard. You could maybe even make an argument for maybe checking back king 3 and king 4 one more time and then only betting like better kings just so you have some king X in your river calling range. But yeah, these are all pretty standard. I think maybe you could also probably bet jacks if you want, but I think tens and lower is probably more of a check again and then either bet the river or call the river. Bluffs, I think all queen high are pretty reasonable here that you didn't bet the flop with. Queen jack, queen 10 if you didn't bet the flop, which I think can be pretty reasonable in a lot of situations, are definitely good hands to bet because you have equity again, so you're not just necessarily just putting dead money out there that doesn't have too much equity. I think some jack highs are reasonable. Some low spades like 6-5 is like betting 6-5 of spades and 5-4 spades on the flop is like not that great. Any Broadway hand, any flush draw, any backdoor flush draw that's okay from the big blind will continue. So like and like 6-5 of spades doesn't get that many. It doesn't get a ton of folds on the flop, and then it turns so little. It turns equity like so rarely that I think checking it back on the flop and planning to either double delay it or delay it is a much better option. So a hand like that, now that it's turned spades, should definitely bet the turn and can just go ahead and bluff the river. Well, we also have checked back some of our worst nut flush draws. I think it's okay to maybe bet these on the turn, even though it's kind of an in-between bet where you're not necessarily folding out worse. It can be sometimes if you have like ace 3, ace 4, they might fold out some better ace highs and you build a pot from when you do hit your nut flush. But I think checking is okay with those as well. I think you would definitely not bet like a hand like ace jack of spades, but or ace jack of diamonds, but a hand like ace 3, ace 4, could be ace 5, could all be reasonable because you do fold at the ace 8 offs and ace 9, so I think that could be pretty reasonable. Or not ace 9, but ace 8, ace 7 type hands could be pretty reasonable. Okay, this is when I was going a little too wild with my button opens, as we saw in another video as well. Open, queen 2 off, reg defends, check back ace king 2, turn 2. Obviously because of the way the board is, any ace is the same. So I would just bet half of them just to have some value bets and then randomize with the other half because you want to have some ace X in your river calling range so you're not just only king X on the river. And obviously you'd bet your 2X. I think 50% is fine. Maybe you could change it up a little more if you want, but I would just pure randomize because I don't think the kickers matter, obviously. Bluffs would be any jack high 10 highs that check back the flop. I think, if you just have like jack 9 of spades or something on the flop, it's not that great of a flop bet. You can't really barrel too much. So just choosing to put your bluff somewhere else like this would be a really good spot. some turned hearts. I think on this type of board, a lot of your hearts would have bet the flop. So you're definitely gonna have to bet with some of your Jack 9, Jack 10, Jack 8 type hands because you're just not gonna have that many heart combos because a lot of them would have bet the flop. Like 6-5 of hearts and 7-6 of hearts and stuff are just gonna bet the flop. Um, let's see. Queen Jack and Queen 10 again. It could be okay to bet these on the turn, mainly because you just have, outs to the nuts. You could check those back as well because, Queen High is going to be good here quite often. Just this is like the most obvious value bets. I'm just showing you another easy one. So it's like we check back the flop, King 10, good value bet. I think there is a separation with your second pairs. I don't think betting 10-7 on the turn is really good here, but a king 10, ace 10, queen 10 can all be quite reasonable. You'd have some jack X, some low spades and stuff like that could bluff. And actually, given the shallow stacks, a hand like 9-8 might want to check the flop because it doesn't really want to bet call. So a hand like that could be reasonable to have as well as a bluff. Okay, this is probably a little bit of controversial. Open fours, big blind defense, check king 7-3, turn 3. I think a lot of people will probe 7x on the turn and possibly any pair. So that means their turn range is just a bunch of garbage. Ace high is generally the best hand most people will have here. So in that spot, I think it's okay to bet for protection / value. Like you'll get some value from ace highs occasionally. And, even like 10-9 has some like equity. I think checking back again and calling the river is totally fine, of course. I think that's probably my suggested line in most situations. I just wanted to show this spot because I think there is some argument you could bet the turn here and just protect versus a 6-outer, and you still do get value from ace highs quite a bit. Versus anyone who's playing somewhat more polarized, they're checking their 7x on the turn. This is definitely just burning money. Like you shouldn't be betting this hand. I think I'm not totally proud of it, but I think there is some merit to it. And I think this is a spot where a lot of people find themselves betting, so I just wanted to talk about it real quick. I think there's definitely some merit to it. I think I would prefer to check back again, but there's definitely some merit to betting. Okay, let's talk about some bluffs. So this is similar to the hand earlier with ace king 2 where I have jack 9. I was saying jack 9 would be a reasonable bluff, and I think ace king, this hand, like again, we have zero equity on the flop. We can't really turn anything, maybe a queen, maybe a 10. But this is a great hand to put in the delay spot. And it's just even better just because of how people perceive this. Like when you, like think about it if you're the big blind spot and some MTT reg checks back the flop on ace king 5. When they bet every single bluff on the flop. Like they're betting this hand, they're betting jack 8, they're betting every like 8-5, 8-6 of whatever, 9-7 off. Just all is the zero equity hand. So when it goes check check, you're like, oh well, they obviously have a weak ace or a king. Like, if you have like king 9 or king 10 versus a tournament player and it goes check check on the flop, you check the turn and they bet, you're like in a really gay spot. Like, I mean, I know we're not folding, but I'm just telling you, this is obviously a pretty gay spot versus most tournament players, which is why it's sweet to like have a lot of bluffs because most people are going to perceive you to play similarly to that. Where like I think I've definitely seen a ton of people fold a king here. I've definitely seen people are definitely folding like a 5. They're folding like, if they have like 7s or whatever. So like this is a great spot to bluff. And, a hand like this, where again, this is a board where we're not going to have that many diamond draws because a lot of them would have bet the flop. A hand like this is definitely a good bet. You're going to fold people off a bunch of their range, especially if they're probing an ace on the turn. I think this spot is just like, you might have like a 90% success rate with this line. So just something to consider is like, with these hands and this goes back to how you think about the flop as well. Remember, it's like an overall picture. So like betting this on the flop, yeah, you get some folds, but you never get to barrel. And once they call the flop, you basically lose the pot. Whereas if you check here, they give you a lot of information on the turn and you get to win the pot like a bunch of the times even when you don't have any real, like, you don't turn equity or anything like that. So I think queen high, jack high, if it's a good queen high, you can probably check again, but a bad queen high, jack high should bluff. I think you're gonna have to barrel off with these types of hands because you're just not gonna have that many diamonds. Of course, if you have some diamonds, you're gonna bet those as well. Villain's just gonna, yeah, a fold a ton here. This is an out of position spot, but it just showed. I thought I'd talk about it real quick. We opened an early position 7-6 suited. They called King 9-9. We check. Just to talk about the flop real quick. I don't think you get a lot of folds on the flop. Any Broadway continues, any ace high with backdoors continues usually. Even pairs, like a lot of people don't fold 8, 7, 6s in position on these to a c bet. So like you're just not getting a lot of folds. I think check folding is correct. Now that we hit this turn, I think this is a great delay barrel. A lot of people will have bet their king on the flop. They definitely bet their like queen jack, queen 10. So they generally just have like weakish pairs that are gonna either call once and fold or just fold the turn right away. Especially if they have ace high and stuff like that. I think because we probably would have bet queen jack and queen 10 and jack 10 with a fairly high frequency on the flop, we're gonna have to start bluffing some ace highs in this position. Like we don't have a bunch of random garbage, so like even like I think ace 3, ace 4, ace 5, all those hands should probably bet once and then probably give up because we'll have enough, plenty of other bluffs. But those hands are your quote unquote high card hands because you just don't have very many queen high and jack highs. So remember, think about your overall range. Like high cards doesn't always just mean queen high, jack high. Like sometimes ace highs are going to be bluffs depending on where they fall into your range. So a hand like I think ace 3 is a good bet once, give up. Ace 4, ace 5. And then of course if the spades get there, I think those could be decent bets. Just showing another like an ace high spot. It's we open check check flop. I think that's super standard. Obviously, turns a jack. So obviously this is our bad high card type hands. I think our value bets are of course just king X. I think you definitely want to check back some king X on the turn just so you have some for your river. I think just choose that according to your blockers. Like I think king queen is a pretty reasonable check again because you block any queen X or two pairs that are going to be the bulk of villain's calling range. So you're gonna get more folds on the turn. So it's better to just save that for the river to either call a bet or value bet when they check to you. But anyway, the bluffs, ace high, I think makes a lot of sense. You're gonna have a lot of low spades, like 6-5 of spades, 7-6 of spades. All those types of hands aren't really betting the flop, so you're gonna have some bluffs. But I think ace highs are gonna be some part of your bluffs here. So remember, you got to think about your overall range, but the way we structure it is still the same. Like you think about your turn draws and you think about your high cards, and generally you're giving up your high cards on the river unless there's just not too many of the other types of flush draws or straight draws that turn. So just always be cognizant because you don't want to bet once and give up too often. You definitely want to be barreling quite a bit. So just like, again, think about your overall range. This is one of the examples where I think it's decent again to possibly overbluff. We check back the flop. We're gonna have a ton of value bets on this turn. So this like because we check back every queen X on the flop. So and one other nice thing is a lot of people bet their queen X themselves in this spot and as the big blind. So then you just get basically if they do that, you just get to win the pot like every time. They just don't have a calling range. So I would be bluffing a lot. I would definitely bet any spades, any jack high, 10 high. I think it's okay to just like maybe even like you can just like bet like super aggressively, like even like a 9-7 of clubs I think is probably totally reasonable to bet. Especially the worst villain plays. As he starts betting his queen X, then you definitely just can just almost bet 100. I think versus good players who obviously realize, okay, the queen is you have to check 100 there. Obviously you want to structure your bluffs a little more carefully there, and then I would just use some of my worst spades and then some of these like jack high, 10 high type hands as a bluff. So in general, I think the delay spot is one of the best spots to bluff in poker. You're going to have a lot of natural value bets there. So the key is to make sure you bluff quite frequently there as well. This is a spot most tournament players are under bluffing quite significantly. So you're going to get away with a lot here. So make sure that you don't just, only have the second pairs and the top pairs in your range. Like you really, this is a spot where you want to make it very tough for people to play versus you, by having all sorts of bluffs there that they can't really just like exploit you hard by folding like a second pair or something insane. Uh, so yeah, I think adding the delay and the double delay into my game was one of the biggest changes that I think helped vault me from say like a decent reg to like a pretty good reg. Was adding these bluffs in quite significantly. Like in tournaments, I think most people really don't understand these spots at all, so it's something you really want to think about and make sure you're attacking quite frequently in your game, and allocating hands correctly so that you have a lot of these bluffs in your turn range. Like if you start betting the flop with every all your air, then you're just not going to be able to have bluffs. So remember, you want to have some hands that are able to bluff here. All right, cool. The next thing we're going to talk about is probably the turn float.